Subcommittee will come to order. Today, the Sea Power and Expeditionary Forces Subcommittees joins the Air and Land Forces Subcommittee in open session to receive testimony on force protection equipment in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, with particular focus on armored vehicles, personal body armor, and counter-IED initiatives. We welcome our witnesses for today. Representing the Army to discuss Army Force Protection Systems are Major General Thomas Spohr, Director of Force Development, Army G8, Brigadier General Peter Fuller, Program Executive Officer, Soldier and Commanding General, Soldier Systems Center. Representing the Marine Corps to discuss Marine Corps Force Protection and the MRAP Joint Vehicle Program is Brigadier General Michael Brogan, Commander, Marine Corps Systems Command, and the Program Executive Officer for the MRAP Joint Program Office. Representing the Joint IED Defeat Organization is the new Director of JIDO, Lieutenant General Michael Oates. Representing the Government Accountability Office is Ms. Davy D'Agostino, Director, Defense Capabilities and Management. Ms. D'Agostino appears to discuss the release of the GAO's latest report on intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance issues based on site visits to Iraq and Afghanistan prepared for the House Armed Services Committee. Today's joint hearing continues the committee's ongoing oversight activities regarding the full spectrum of force protection matters in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our last formal activity regarding force protection was a classified briefing in December of 2009. We meet today to receive updates on these critical life-saving programs and to provide an opportunity for the families of our fighting men and women to hear what the Army, Marine Corps, and the DoD leadership are doing to protect their loved ones against the threats of their soldiers and Marines face abroad. Today's hearing is expected to cover and provide updates on a wide range of programs to include the mine-resistant family of vehicles, to include the lighter and smaller MRAP all-terrain vehicle, individual protective equipment such as lighter weight body armor, the Army's new battle dress uniform, equipment used to detect snipers, counter-radio-controlled IED electronic warfare jammers, the continued challenge of getting adequate intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, and improvements in weapons and tactics for operational forces. At this time last year, the MRAP all-terrain vehicle was still under source selection. No vehicles had been produced beyond small numbers of test assets, and no vehicles had been fielded to Afghanistan. In just 1 year, over 4,700 M-ATVs have been produced, and over 1,400 have been delivered to Afghanistan, and over 900 have been fielded to operational units. The current producer is averaging 1,000 vehicles per month. I want to publicly thank General Brogan and his entire team for the service they provided to our nation in spearheading the MRAP and M-ATV effort. And as I've publicly mentioned before, I don't think there's ever been an acquisition program in the history of our nation that is fielded as fast and with such immediate and dramatic results. Your team's efforts have saved lives, General, and I want to thank you on behalf of the American people. There are young people alive today because of what you have done, what you and your team have done. There are still major challenges ahead for us with respect to long-term sustainment of these vehicles, both in the field, here, and overseas, as well as improving these vehicles through capability insertions. I'm aware the MRAP Joint Program Office is currently pursuing several capability insertions and vehicle modifications to include installing independent suspensions on legacy vehicles, heavier and more capable door hinges on the M-ATVs, and I expect to receive updates on these today. A critical component to force protection is adequate training. That means having the ability to realistically train on the equipment the warfighter will actually use in combat, ranging from individual equipment to jammers and armored vehicles. For example, more than half of the accidents involved in MRAP since November 2007 have been rollovers. I realize some of these rollovers were attributed to poor roads and infrastructure, but I do believe some of the rollovers might have been prevented through better training. General Brogan, you stated in formal response to these subcommittees that, and I'm quoting, "The better trained the driver, the less likely they are to conduct a maneuver that will hazard the vehicle." I understand that one of the lessons learned from the original legacy MRAP program was to concurrently field vehicles to address both operational and training requirements, and that we are applying that lesson in the M-ATV program. I'm still concerned over the limited number of legacy MRAP vehicles available to the Army for training and hope to gain a better understanding of the Army's plan for addressing these vehicle shortfalls. Clearly, the MATV is a good news story and demonstrates that we are capable of applying lessons learned. However, we cannot become complacent. In the last year, Afghanistan has experienced a near doubling of IED events, and U.S. casualties have continued to increase. General Oates, in your testimony, you state, and I'm quoting, over the past 3 years in Afghanistan, casualty rates for our warfighters have increased by roughly 50%. This concerns me, and I look forward to hearing from you on how your organization is addressing this trend. Before going to witness opening remarks, I would like to recognize my friend. Okay, well, I won't be recognizing my friend from Washington State, Congressman Smith. I will, however, recognize my ranking member and my friend from Missouri, Mr. Aiken, for any comments he may make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for scheduling this important hearing today. And because you've hit a lot of the highlights, I'm going to be brief. I'd also like to thank our GAO and Army witnesses for being here today. And, of course, General Brogan, you're not a stranger to this committee, and we're delighted to have you back. Thank you for being here. And also, General Oates, I believe this is your first time testifying in front of this committee. Welcome. This is an important subject. The testimony you're about to provide will assist us in determining how best to proceed with providing the necessary congressional oversight of these programs. Again, I want to thank all of you for your service to our country. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Air and Land Forces Subcommittee, the Honorable Roscoe Bartlett.
Thank you. I'll be very brief so we can get to the testimony and questions. Thank you very much for your service to your country. Thank you for being here today. Look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. The chair now recognizes the new chairman of the Air and Land Forces Subcommittee, the Honorable Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for running a little bit behind schedule. Welcome to you all. If there is no objection, I would ask that my full statement be included in the record, and then I will follow Mr. Bartlett's lead. And I look forward to your testimony, and we'll ask questions at the appropriate time, and appreciate the very important issues that we're here to discuss today and the work that you all are doing on them. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Without objection, all the witnesses' prepared testimony will be included in the record. General Oates, thank you for your service and taking the time to be with us today. Please proceed with your remarks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and testify. The IED remains the single greatest threat to life and limb of our forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, to include the civilian employees that are present. And so the protection of those forces is a priority for the organization I now lead, the Joint IED Defeat Organization. I have provided a written statement, sir, and I'll stand by, and I'm anxious to answer your questions. Thanks, sir.
Chairman Taylor, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Aiken, Ranking Member Bartlett, and others distinguished members of the committee. On behalf of the Army, Brigadier General Peter Fuller and I are honored to be here today to provide updates on Army force protection efforts. Let me preface my remarks by thanking the members of both committees for their leadership and continued support of the Army. We share a common purpose and commitment to develop and field the best equipment available to our soldiers, Army civilians, and contractors serving in Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. The brave men and women serving today represent the best of our society, and they continue to perform magnificently against a determined enemy in a complex and dangerous operational environment. After more than 8 years of continuous combat, we recognize the importance of keeping our deployed forces at the highest level of readiness and providing them the best capabilities available. Protection of our soldiers and critical warfighting assets remains the Army's highest priority. In response to the continued threat of improvised explosive devices, suicide bombers, other non-traditional threats, as well as the more conventional threats such as small arms fire, the Army has pursued numerous initiatives to enhance the mobility, lethality, and survivability of our soldiers and the formations in which they serve. These initiatives are captured in complementary and reinforcing layers of protection, which include continuous improvements to individual soldier protection, new and enhanced armored and wheeled tracked vehicles, new active and passive base defense capabilities, improved battlefield situational awareness with better intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms, as well as advances in biometrics and robotics. In addition, the Army has taken steps to lighten the soldiers' load by fielding plate carriers, lightweight machine guns, and tripods. While we have made significant improvements in our force protection posture, we know we must continue to provide improved solutions for two significant reasons. First, technology is always changing, advancements are always being made, and we owe it to our soldiers to continue to invest in promising technologies that will give them a decisive edge in combat. Second, the weapons, tactics, and motivation of our adversaries continues to adapt, and we must be more versatile, adaptable, and unpredictable than the enemies we face. Therefore, the Army's ongoing commitment to provide our soldiers with the best equipment in the world is just that, ongoing. We are always mindful that the soldiers in the field are the ones that bear the burden of battle. The Army remains fully committed to provide unwavering support for our soldiers by giving them the best protective equipment and capabilities available to successfully confront current and emerging threats. Again, thank you for this opportunity to testify before your subcommittees today on this important issue. Thank you for your steadfast support of the American soldier. General Fuller and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Brigadier General Fuller.
Thank you, sir. I have no prepared remarks. I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
I hope you guys don't think you're getting off this light. Chair now recognizes a true American. You're all true American heroes, but another true American hero, Brigadier General Brogan.
Chairman Taylor, Chairman Smith, ranking members Aiken and Bartlett, distinguished members of the subcommittees, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon and to answer questions concerning Marine Corps Force Protection Programs and the Joint Mine-Resistant Ambush Protected Vehicle Program. I appreciate, sir, that you are going to enter the written statement for the record. Sir, your support these last many years in providing the necessary funding to equip our Marines and the joint force to meet the challenges of regular warfare has been tremendous. We work together on a daily basis with our counterparts in JIATO and the various program executive offices in the Army to field just this type of equipment. Throughout this conflict, we have fielded numerous generations of gear and have had the opportunity to iteratively improve it. That goes for individual body armor plates, from the small arms protective insert to the enhanced small arms protective insert and the side SAPI plates. In flame-resistant gear, from Nomex suits normally worn by combat vehicle crewmen to now having fire-retardant uniforms that include antimicrobial, antibacterial, anti-vector properties. I very much appreciate your kind remarks regarding the MRAP program. But, sir, as Paul Mann, the program manager, frequently states, it is a team sport. The leadership of the Congress in providing funding, the support of the Secretary of Defense, the services, the defense agencies, and our industrial partners at all levels, prime, sub, vendor, and suppliers, has made that program possible. Because of that, we've been able to rapidly field these vehicles and have a marked impact on the survivability of our joint warfighters. I would only ask that we recognize this is an open hearing, and though the topic is very important, some of the matters in force protection would go into classified areas. We don't want to broach that. We also, sir, would not like to discuss specific capabilities or limitations of the equipment in an open session. This nation has fielded the best equipped, best protected force in its history, largely due to the support of the Congress. And finally, sir, on a personal note, this is likely my last appearance in front of these committees as the commander of Marine Corps Systems Command. I very much appreciate the access that you've provided me, the patience you've afforded me, and I look forward to your questions.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Ms. Davy D'Agostino. I hope that's correct.
You did a great job. Thank you. Chairman Taylor, Chairman Smith, members of the subcommittees, thank you for having me here today to discuss GAO's January 2010 report on DoD's Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, or ISR, processing, exploitation, and dissemination, or sharing capabilities. There's been a dramatic increase, as you know, in demand for ISR systems to collect intelligence in Iraq and Afghanistan, to a point where DoD now has more than 6,800 unmanned aircraft systems alone. ISR is also seen as the first line of defense for U.S. and allied forces against insurgent attacks and roadside bombs. But to be useful to the warfighter, after intelligence is collected, it must be analyzed and shared with all those who need it in a timely manner. The presentation board beside me shows the intelligence data processing cycle, and you should have a sheet in your briefing book that shows that too up close. This processing cycle is commonly described in 5 interconnected phases. At the front end, you have first, planning and direction, and second, collection. At the back end, you have third, processing and exploitation, fourth, dissemination, and fifth, evaluation and feedback. My testimony today focuses on phases 3 and 4 of the cycle, or the back end of the cycle, that transforms the collected data into usable intelligence for the force. Today I will discuss first the challenges DoD faces in processing, exploiting, and disseminating the information collected by ISR systems, and the extent to which DoD has developed the capabilities needed to share the information. We've reported on DoD's challenges with ISR integration, requirements, and tasking of collection assets. For this report, we spent 16 months obtaining and analyzing documentation from the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, all 4 military services, the ISR Task Force, Joint Forces Command, Central Command, the National Security Agency, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We also traveled to several locations in Iraq and the United States to observe the processing of ISR data firsthand. We found that the military services and defense agencies face long-standing challenges with processing, exploiting, and disseminating the ISR data they collect. First, the dramatic increase in collection has not been accompanied by an increase in processing capabilities, and these capabilities are now overwhelmed. As General Deptula, the Air Force's ISR chief, recently stated, in the not-too-distant future, the department will be swimming in sensors, and it needs to ensure that we don't end up drowning in data. Second, transmitting ISR data requires high-capacity bandwidth for communications, which can be extremely limited in theater. Third, analyst shortages, including linguists, hamper DoD's ability to exploit all the ISR information being collected. For example, Central Command officials told us they exploit less than 1/2 of the signals intercepts collected from the Predator. DoD has begun some initiatives to try to deal with these issues, but it's too soon to tell whether or not the efforts will result in measurable improvement. DoD is also trying to improve the sharing of intelligence information through a family of interoperable systems called the Distributed Common Ground Surface System, or DCGS. DoD has directed the services to transition to DCGS, but each service is at a different stage in doing so. Further, to facilitate the sharing of ISR data on this system, DoD developed common information standards and protocols. A key problem for all of this is that the legacy ISR systems, the older systems, do not automatically tag data for sharing with certain key information like location and time, and the services are also not prioritizing the data that should be tagged. The services have expressed concern to us that DoD has not developed overarching guidance or a concept of operations that provides them needed direction and priorities for sharing intelligence information. As a result, we recommended in our report that DoD develop such guidance and that the services then develop plans with timelines and prioritize and identify the types of ISR data they will share consistent with the overarching guidance. DoD agreed with our recommendations. And while my testimony has been focused on the back end of the intelligence cycle, our prior work for this committee has shown that there are also problems on the front end. In theater, collection taskings are fragmented, and visibility into how ISR systems are being used both within and across domains is lacking. And all of these challenges combine to increase the risk that the operational commanders on the ground may not be receiving mission-critical ISR information, which can also create the perception that additional collection assets are needed to fill gaps. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittees, this concludes my oral summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Chair thanks the gentlewoman. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the Air Land Forces Subcommittee, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Oates, I'll start with you on the GIODO process. When this originally came up, certainly in our response to the problems that we had in Iraq, it was multifaceted and an evolving threat in Iraq and now in Afghanistan as well. And GIODO was stood up to try to grab every corner of that and do everything we could to respond to that threat. And there are many, many different pieces of it. There have been some concerns on behalf of the committee and others about the way that money has come together, how well organized and well structured GIODO is, because there's a bunch of different ideas floating around out there. It's everything from individual, certainly body protection for our troops. It's the vehicles that they're in. Variety of different other countermeasures that we've employed, and I think there has been some concerns in terms of keeping track of the money and whether or not it's being well spent and well organized. I know you have made statements that that is a priority of yours to make sure that you get that organized and structured. I was wondering if you could just take a moment to sort of walk us through how that has improved and improve our confidence that the money and the resources are going to their absolute best use in terms of defeating the threat.
Thank you, Congressman. It is an interest of mine in two areas. One is full accountability. I do know that we're the stewards of the government's money, and I want to make sure that that's not opaque to anyone, especially the Congress. And the second is transparency with our other partners. That would include the services, the other combatant commanders as well. Let me first start at the process. There are a great number of good ideas. Those are generally filtered by the combatant commander, and as you know, comes forward with a joint urgent operational needs statement. That is screened by the combatant commander and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and not all of those come to GIODO. We are generally the first stop if it's a largely IED-related issue or there's a requirement to respond very quickly. So in our budgeting, we actually set aside about 20% of our budget every year for that emerging enemy technique or capability gap that appears that we did not anticipate. I received my priorities from the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, and he has just shifted mine recently on becoming the director to Afghanistan Surge, and so we have appropriately assigned our funding towards meeting the capability gaps and JUONs that have come out of Central Command.
So how do you measure the effectiveness of what you do? And it's hard, I know, because we're certainly not going to stop the IED threat no matter how we do it. But how do you measure whether or not a given idea and a given amount of money spent on that idea actually worked or didn't?
Sir, let me take that in just a second. I want to conclude by reminding you that we do provide monthly reports, if not more frequent, to the oversight committees to ensure there is absolute transparency on the spending of our money. And I'm very confident that we can account for it. This is a very difficult challenge, establishing measures of effectiveness against dollars spent in this particular realm. So there are some objective tenets that we use. We actually look at the total number of IEDs, those that are effective, how many and what type of IEDs render a resultant casualty or killed. And we can draw some analogies to money that we put into force protection, how much more energy is required by the enemy to inflict a casualty, for instance. There are subjective tests, largely in the area of training, and we rely on our troop commanders and their non-commissioned officers in particular to inform us about what training is required and what might be effective. And most recently, in my short time as the director, I had a chance to see some what you would call good ideas, developmental ideas in simulator training, which we know intuitively from having been in the fight now for a number of years will bring dividends, save our soldiers, and deny the enemy access to our soldiers. But this is a major challenge, is trying to establish concrete, objective measures of effectiveness against the money that's spent, sir.
Have you found that the challenges are significantly different in Afghanistan than in Iraq, or is it pretty much the same battle?
Sir, the battle writ large against the IED is fairly similar, but the methods employed and the type of IED is very different, as is the terrain in Afghanistan. I'd be happy to elaborate if you'd like me to.
You can. If you want to, actually, I would love if your staff could just get a statement on that. I've taken up quite a bit of time. I do have a couple other questions, but I'll wait until the next go-around to give some of my colleagues a chance. But I would be interested if your staff could provide some information on how they see the threat different and the response different as it's shifting more to Afghanistan. Obviously, it's still a problem in Iraq, but it's certainly a growing threat in Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And just for everyone's information, I made the decision that for Chairman Smith and the two ranking members, we won't have a 5-minute rule, but I would remind you that we're expected to have votes sometime around 3:15. Mr. Aiken, proceed, Mr. Aiken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, General Oates, my understanding is there were some people that were critical about resources, what we were doing with your organization. You've had a chance, as I understand it, to kind of read over that. You've been a user of the services. Now you're in charge of trying to provide the same services you were using in the past. Are there some structural things that you've wanted to change about how you approach the problem or anything, or is it just a kind of a ongoing management situation, or what has been your perspective moving from user to person in charge?
Thank you, sir. I've been a tactical customer of JIDO's now for about 6 years. Over 3 tours in Iraq, I didn't always know where the capability and benefits was coming from. I have a clearer vision of that now. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Congress for what it's done for my soldiers, both in the 101st and the 10th Mountain Division. Now, from my perspective as the director of JIDO, one of my key concerns is ensuring that we provide a good response to the Congress about these particular lines of operation, whether they're adequately funded, whether we need to make any changes. The defeating the device, largely focused on some technology developments and attacking the network, is an area that really is difficult to establish measures of effectiveness, going back to the Chairman's question, and training the force, which in my experience has been the greatest return on investment, an area where, as the Chairman alluded earlier with the MRAP, providing quality training for soldiers in all 3 of those domains, defeating the device, attacking the network, and, in fact, training in this environment will return great dividends. I'm not prepared at this point to give you a very specific answer on whether adjustments need to be made. We're adequately funded at this point, sir. The funding that's been provided by the Congress is allowing us to meet these very urgent capability gap requirements that have come out of Afghanistan, and we believe that we can handle them at this point.
Thank you. And then second question over to the loop, the intelligence data processing cycle, and being able to process all of we're picking up so many, our sensors are so good. How would have you seen an approach that what has to be done to process the data? Do you have any suggestions along that line, or what's our plan to be able to process as well as to collect?
Yes, one of the challenges I think they have had is the problem of tagging this data automatically. If it's not automatically tagged either on board the system or at the ground station, it has to be done somehow, maybe by hand or by some kind of adapter with a computer. So it would take time away from the soldier's main mission. So it creates a difficult problem. And if it's not tagged, then it's not discoverable by other people. Even if it's put up onto a DSIGS, it's not discoverable without being tagged. So I think that's probably the most pivotal problem that they face in being able to share what is that.
I don't understand a word you just said to me. What do you mean tagged and discoverable? Those are not my normal vocabulary.
Okay, it's like when you take a picture with your digital camera, it has a date on it, and when you load it onto your computer, you can find your digital photos by date. If it doesn't have any tag on it, there's no way to find it for you. So this is part of the problem with...
So there's a classification, how to identify information problem.
Right, it's how to locate it. It's like giving it a name, and without the name, there's no way for somebody to discover it and then use it. So
So how do we name it then?
well, there are requirements that the data be tagged, but the problem is some of the older systems do not have the capability to automatically do that, and therefore some unknown amount of the data that we're collecting right now in theater cannot be shared in its form that it comes off the platform. So
I would think that you'd want a date and a location, wouldn't you? Would
Right.
those two be the main things that you're looking for?
Right.
Because if somebody does an IED, you want to run time backwards
and the time,
2 days and
time
see
is
who's
good
been
too.
there.
There are these standards and protocols and also rules that have been made about the kind of tag data that you put on when you tag it. General Brogan is going, yes, yes. But it's important to get that onto the data so that other people can find it and use it and benefit from it.
So it's a classification kind of thing. General Brogan, you want to comment? Or
It's not really classification in the sense of confidential, secret, top secret,
No, I
but
didn't-
more of identification by date, time, and location, sir.
And that allows you then, if something occurs, you can go back and take a look at what you might have seen, license plates or
Well, it makes the
photos of
database
people.
searchable, and so particularly if you're looking at the same area in multiple scans, you can look for differences. Were there disturbances that were not there previously to help identify the locations of IEDs, sir?
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. We now recognize the ranking member of Air Land, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. The first is for General Fuller and General Brogan, and the second is for General Fuller. General Fuller and General Brogan, I continue to be very concerned about the short-term and long-term effects on our soldiers and Marines in regards to the total weight of the individual equipment that they're carrying in Afghanistan. As you know, in Vietnam, the average weight was 30 to 40 pounds. Today, they're carrying 90 to 100 pounds, and sometimes even more than that. Obviously, body armor is a major part of that weight increase. And I understand that we have modular and tailorable designs that can help with this issue, and certainly every pound that we can reduce this weight counts. But in the mid to long term, what are we doing to incentivize industry to lower this weight? For example, what would it take, assuming an ESAFI level of protection, to reduce the weight of body armor by, say, 50% in less than 5 years? Have we even asked industry something along these lines? And General Fuller, as you know, the Army and the Department of Defense have recently started a new round of body armor testing to help establish a standard testing protocol with a specific focus on statistical analysis and statistical confidence levels. We briefly discussed this in my office a couple of weeks ago. Can you explain this testing, give us an update on the progress of the testing, and explain what you hope to achieve with the results? Thank you.
So you're absolutely right. The weight is significant. The long-term impact is currently unknown. We have not seen a marked increase in injuries to our Marines during training or during their combat operations, but we don't know the long-term impact. In answer to your question, we do communicate with industry in a number of fora. In all of my public comments, every 2 years we hold an advanced planning brief for industry where all of those who do business with the United States Marine Corps and academia, as well as government labs, are there, and we lay out for them what our priorities are. The Commandant and the Commanding General of the Marine Corps Combat Development Command have all indicated that reducing the weight is important. I believe the most significant thing we need, though, sir, is a materials breakthrough. We have nothing better than the ceramic plates that we're currently using with the attendant weight that goes with them. We need a materials science advance. And to that end, the Commandant, in his guidance for the planning of POM 12, has directed that our S&T funding be fenced. If we have bills to pay corporately throughout the institution, we are not permitted to reach into those science and technology accounts to get the money. Much of that money is not run by my command. It's handled by the Office of Naval Research, the Naval Research Laboratory, and the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. But that is an area where we could certainly use help from our industrial partners.
We were advocating, as you know, for a specific line for R&D for this. We believe that the potential for markedly reducing this weight is there if industry is sufficiently incentivized. We believe that including the acquisition of this and the research on this, along with underwear and uniforms and helmets and so forth, is probably not the best way to get the best technology out there. General Fuller, my first question.
Yes, sir. As General Brogan said, weight is a concern we have with our soldiers. And when we think about our soldier, we try not to treat them like they're a Christmas tree and we just hang things on them. Body armor is one of those elements that we are putting on our soldiers, and we are looking at how do we lighten that load. We've lightened the load when we fielded them the new improved outer tactical vest, so it's 3 pounds lighter. And as General Brogan said, not only are we trying to lighten their load, but we are redistributing how that weight was worn by the soldier. So now it's coming off all on their shoulders down to their hips, where you can distribute and carry that weight better. We've also looked at, on the soft body armor side, a new plate carrier, which we are now fielding into Afghanistan. Between a full-up improved outer tactical vest and our plate carrier is an 8-pound delta. That 8 pounds is what our soldiers are looking for. In terms of the hard body armor that you're talking about, as General Brogan said, we really need a new technology. We are just tweaking the edges of that technology right now to refine it to try to lighten some of that weight. But until we have that new breakthrough in science and technology, I don't believe our R&D efforts or even the independent research and development efforts of our contractors is going to give us that breakthrough that we need to get that lighter weight onto our soldiers. But we treat them as a total system. You heard General Spohr talk about we're also providing our same soldiers with improved lethality, and that lethality is now lighter. We're giving them a lighter machine gun because you want to give them the total package, their survivability package, their lethality package, and also their operating environment. When we talked, you asked the other question specific to what we call our Phase 2 testing. Sir, as you're aware, Congress directed that we conduct additional testing on our ESAPI, our Enhanced Small Arms and Protective Inserts, and our XSAPI, which is the next generation of our protective inserts. We conducted that testing with GAO oversight and also DOT&E oversight. And when we completed that testing, we realized we've been working on a process. Our testing protocol has been one of overmatch. We take our products and we test them to a round that's heavier, harder, and faster than any round found in the battlefield. And we realized what we're doing is taking that capability and giving a great capability, but we don't have a statistical confidence that we have the best body armor. We know that it's the best because of what we hear from our soldiers and through the overmatch testing. So we're transitioning our testing. We're transitioning from overmatch to a statistical confidence basis. I'm really pleased to report that we've conducted one phase of that testing where we've taken real plates from our soldiers downrange, wearing them, we took them off, we gave them other ones, but we took them off their backs, brought them back, and we've shot at those plates with real threat rounds at a high statistical confidence interval, and we have outstanding performance with those plates. We're taking another set of plates, doing the same thing, and these are going to be brand new coming off a production line. So what we're doing is I tell everybody we're stepping up our game. We've always had quality product, but we're not going from bad to good in any of this. We're going from good to great, and we want to ensure to the American public and Congress and anybody else we have the best body armor, and now we're doing it through a statistical method so you can demonstrate it with high confidence that it's quality product.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like the record to show, and I would like our witnesses to confirm this. There have been some questions about specific protocol in the testing procedures. My understanding is that none of that has in any way permitted any defective armor to get out to the troops. That these were some protocol differences that did not in any way impact the quality of the armor that our young men and women wear. The XSAPI is not yet fielded. Is that correct? It's there to be used if needed?
Yes, sir. The XAPI product is currently listed as contingency stocks. It is available if the threat materializes in the theater, and we're watching through different intelligence sources very carefully if that threat materializes in theater, and it has not. It's a heavier plate. The reason we are not fielding it now, threat's not there, and we don't want the soldiers to bear the weight of a heavier plate. It's approximately a half-pound heavier for each plate to have them have that capability when the plates that we have right now are doing the job, as you said. We might have had some process issues, never had any challenge with our product, quality product. Thank you.
Our fathers and mothers can be assured that these differences in testing procedures in no way had any impact on the quality of the protection that got out to the field to our young men and women. That's a correct statement?
Yes, sir. That is an absolute correct statement.
I just want to make sure the record shows that, because I want to remove any concern that in any way any armor that was less than what we thought it was got out to our young men and women. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, Mr. Ortiz. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your service. I know that you were touching on the testing of the technical vest, but we're buying from two different sources. Am I correct?
In two different sources, you mean between the Marine Corps and the Army, sir?
Correct.
We have the same product, sir.
It's the same product, but different.
Different colors, just as we have different color uniforms on today. On the plates, when we talk about body armor, there are two components. The soft body armor, same ballistic packages inside, different color, and how we might attach them. On the hard plates, the Army procures the hard body armor plates for all the services, so the Marines are getting the exact same plates that the Army or the Air Force or the Navy is getting. We have 3 vendors building the ESAPI plates, and the Army is no longer in the procurement business for plates. We've transitioned that for ESAPI plates over to DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, and they are procuring it for sustainment of all services.
And the prices are the same for the two different services?
For the hard plates, yes, sir, because it's off of our contract, and they just buy the same thing.
I spent some time in Italy last year visiting with the troops who were getting ready to deploy, and one of the things that the Army was very concerned with was the color of the camouflaged uniform that they wear. They would much rather have what the Marines had. Are you gentlemen sharing information with one another to see what would be the best uniform to train in? Not to train, but to go, because both Marines and Army are being shot at. Now, have you decided on the Army, at least, on the uniform, or are you going to continue to have the same camouflage uniform that you're utilizing today?
The first part I'd like to answer on, sir, is the Marines and the Army. General Brogan and myself work very closely together. Our teams are working very closely on sharing information as to what we're working on. Matter of fact, the Marines were in our office yesterday looking at our new capabilities and inquiring as to what we're doing and how we're doing it. We're doing the same thing with Special Operations Command. So the 3 commands that are operating and generating new capability all the time, we're sharing all that data. Specific to the uniform, the Army has made a decision based on a new methodology that we have developed that we're sharing with the Marines and the other services, that we believe we need a different color uniform for Afghanistan specifically. And we are in the process of generating that uniform. We're calling it the multicam uniform. And when you talk about our uniform, our Army combat uniform, I consider it to be 2 parts. One is the chassis, how it's designed, how we wear things such as the Velcro and things like that, and the other is the color. When we field this new uniform to our troops in Afghanistan, not only are we going to change the chassis, we get soldier feedback. We're constantly getting input from the soldiers, understanding where are the challenges with our uniform. So we're making some chassis changes, and we're making a color change specific to Afghanistan. And that is going to be the multicam uniform that will be fielded starting in July, sir. Now, we did consider in that process the Marine Corps uniforms, and actually we had 57 different uniform options that we considered. And where we see the Army operating in Afghanistan, we believe that this uniform would work the best in all of the environments in Afghanistan.
How soon before you get them?
We will start seeing the first uniforms available in the July time period, sir, and we'll start fielding them to the units deploying in August, the major brigades going over in August. And then we're working carefully with the theater to provide that same capability to the soldiers that are in the theater, but we're working through with the theater to ensure we don't fill up their lines of communications with uniforms when they're also supporting a surge of troops. So we're working in this whole effort real time, sir.
One of the things that they were concerned with was that the issues were not sufficient because they wore out quicker. And then if they needed another set, they had to pay for them. Are you aware of that?
Sir, I am aware of that. Matter of fact, I received your letter concerning that. Two items. One, the uniforms that we issue to our soldiers that are used in a combat zone are fire-resistant uniforms. They don't wear the same as our regular uniform that you would see. They look at exactly the same in terms of the chassis and the color. They just are a different material for fire-resistant. So they wear differently. What we do is provide our soldiers with 4 of these uniforms before they deployed, and as they wear out those uniforms, they can go into the supply system and get reissued uniforms in theater. So the soldier does not have to pay for uniforms when they're in the theater if they tear them, rip them, or whatever they may do to them.
Glad to hear this because it was one of the main concerns when I spent time with them in Italy. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I would only add that the fire-resistant uniform
Yes,
is
go ahead.
organizational equipment. It is issued to the Marines in theater, and then they wear it out over there. They do not have to buy that uniform. They do not wear the flame-resistant uniforms when they are back at home station in garrison.
Thank you so much.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Hunter, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. First thing, General Fuller, just wanted to make you aware of something in case you aren't. Do you know what the counter bomber is? The ECP device called counter bomber?
Not directly, no, sir.
Low-level radar, has some video. The Marines are using it right now. Air Force is using it over there. The Army has 12 here in a warehouse that it has yet to deploy. General Brogan, do you know what I'm talking about here?
I am familiar with it, sir, and I would tell you that it has met with mixed results from the user in theater. They are dissatisfied with its performance, too many false alarms, and so we are
Is it better than nothing, or is it worth?
It may or may not be.
Okay.
Best handled probably offline, sir.
Okay, gotcha. Going with that, the only reason I bring this up isn't because it's a great device or a bad one. It's that the Army's got 12 sitting back here. So they're in a warehouse, and this goes along with other things too, where there's situations where we have stuff and the Army buys it, different services buy it, could be anybody, and then it sits here as opposed to being deployed. There's no plan right now from the Army of where they want to put them, so they're just sitting here. So this is one of those things that has been fast-tracked, has been purchased, has been fast-track testing, and now it's just sitting here in a warehouse. There's 12 of them. Just so you know, they are here. There's 12 in the U.S. in a warehouse, haven't been deployed yet, and to see what if the Army's going to use them at all, or try to use them, or try to upgrade them, or whatever. So that's the first thing. Second, want to get on to one more thing, just to touch base with you. As everybody looks at a new carbine to replace the M4 or replace the upper receiver or do something with it, if we need anything done with it, if at all, if it's found that we do want to upgrade it. Right now, there's only 3 competitors in our small arms industrial base that are listed that are viable options to make the new carbine. Okay, there's 3 of them. One makes the Modus 50 cal machine gun, so they're out. Then the other 2 left are the ones that make the M4 now, and a foreign company, a Belgian company. So my question is, the Secretary of Defense has the ability right now to waive this rule and bring other companies in, like the 3 or 4 other American small arms manufacturers that we have into this competition. And my question is, have you encouraged him to do so, or will you?
Sir, I understand what you're talking about. When we look at both the improved carbine competition that will be upcoming and also improving our M4 in a parallel path, we are looking at ensuring we have a full and open competition, meaning all vendors can come forward. Recognizing that the current language would preclude potential full and open, We are working through that process right now. I cannot say that we haven't asked the Secretary of Defense for a waiver at this time, but we are considering that process and how we're going to do that.
Great. Okay. And my last question is for General Oates, something we don't talk about too often. We talk about IEDs and what's going on with those. I was able to talk with Dr. Ash Carter and General Paxton, who lead up the IED task force. It's a party of two, and that's good, I think, because they were talking about they're able to get more MRAPs over. They're able to do some things to bring people's different lanes together and just get things going over faster. And they have Secretary Gates' ear all the time. I asked them something yesterday, and they didn't have an answer. I asked General Petraeus this morning, didn't have an answer, and it's this. Do we own any road in Afghanistan? Do we own it? Do we own 20 kilometers? Do we own 5 kilometers? Can we say that we have persistent coverage of any road at all, any certain amount where we have ISR, whether it's manned or unmanned, watching that road?
Sir, I wouldn't, I'm from this distance away from the warfight, I wouldn't hazard a guess whether we actually own the road, any stretch of it, 24 hours a day. I do know that there is adequate ISR coverage and force to dominate portions of the road when they operate on them, but I quite frankly haven't looked at how many kilometers that is. My first visit to Afghanistan was a couple of weeks ago, and I was struck by the difference in Afghanistan vice Iraq in terms of how much unpaved road there is and the extreme peril of operating, especially in the east and the north, extreme fall-offs on either side, and a twice as large country from Iraq. I think.
But less road than Iraq. Less ASRs, less MSRs. You only have 1/4 of the ring road from RC South to Nangarhar you got to cover.
I would agree with you. Obviously, less paved road, but I couldn't give you an answer on how much we actually control day to day, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Maryland, Ms. Songus.
Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, Massachusetts. My
I only
apologies.
say that because I know General Fuller is from Massachusetts as well, and we're proud of it. First, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here. I appreciate all the time and effort you've not only put into this hearing, but that you put into providing our service members with the best force protection equipment available. Your efforts truly save lives, and I thank you for that. General Fuller, as I said, it's nice to see you again. I want to commend you and all of our witnesses on the fine work that has been done throughout the past 8 years to improve soldier survivability on the battlefield due to improvements in body armor. The services have come a long way to ensure each and every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine has the individual protection equipment that they need. But there's still far to go, and I still have some concerns about how the Department of Defense is going to meet the requirements of reduced weight, operationally tailored body armor. My primary concern is in the fact that the Department of Defense failed to establish separate procurement and RDT&E budget line items for body armor, as was mandated in last year's National Defense Authorization Act. And this failure leads to the perception, in spite of what you all have been saying here today, that Department of Defense, the Army, and the Marine Corps are not committed to body armor as an investment item. In fact, body armor procurement has traditionally been funded through supplemental and overseas contingency operations funding, and this year is no different. The Army is requesting $327 million for body armor in OCO, while there is no discernible amount requested in the base. What is going to happen when there is no more OCO funding and the services can no longer count on the supplemental funds to procure essential protective equipment? The lack of commitment to move body armor procurement funding into the base is compounded by the fact that the Army reported in a hearing we held last week on acquisition and modernization that its fiscal year 11 base budget request for modernization of body armor programs is $0. By requesting body armor funding solely in the overseas contingency operations funds and by putting practically no dollars against research and development for body armor, my concern is that services are setting themselves up for a future situation where once again our soldiers are deployed for combat operations with inadequate and outdated body armor. So now here are my questions, and I'm going to ask several. First, General Fuller and General Brogan, what is the long-term investment strategy for body armor procurement and RDT&E? And I know, as we've heard today, the Department is creating one standard for body armor testing and evaluation, and I appreciate your efforts. But what is the Army and the Marine Corps and the other services doing to create the same synergy of effort when it comes to procurement and research and development of body armor? If you could please describe the process you use to communicate body armor requirements and performance specifications to industry.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your question. As we have talked about before, it is a complex issue when we talk about our soldier protection. We are looking in the Army as to what should be in a portfolio associated with our soldier protection. And when we talk about that, we look at how do we protect the total soldier from their head to toe. And we're looking at the bomb suits, the concealable body armor, our hard and soft ballistic armor that we were talking about previously, even our fire-resistant uniforms and our ballistic eyewear. We are working within the Army and the Department to address the language that was in address this year's language, identifying we needed to have a research and development and a procurement line. At this time, we don't have it. I recognize that. We're trying to define what should be in that line, what components, and then how much should be there. In terms of why we're not looking at buying additional product in the future, from a procurement perspective, our requirement right now in the Army is approximately 966,000 improved outer tactical vests, and we are reaching the end of that procurement. In terms of our hard ESAPI plates, we've procured over 2 million of the ESAPI plates, and we have on contract 240,000 of our ex-SAPI that I talked about as contingency stocks. So I believe our soldiers are covered, but I do recognize we need to think where are we going to go in the future when we want to have a new capability, and how do we fund for that when currently we are funding everything through OCO.
General Brogan.
Yes, ma'am. To actually communicate the performance specifications to industry, we do that through requests for information. Can you provide this capability? Requests for quotation, which is how much would it be, what are your production capacities, that sort of information. And then when there is an actual decision to buy, it's a request for procurement. Tell us in a proposal how much it would be, what your production capacity would be, the rates, delivery schedules, and things like that. So those are the performance specifications. With respect to purchasing, you're absolutely correct. We have purchased a large amount of this equipment with the overseas contingency operation funding and the supplementals prior to that. As General Fuller said, we now have in our possession the required quantities. However, the soft body armor wears out roughly every 3 years. It has not met the investment threshold to be funded through a procurement line. We have funded that through an operations and maintenance line. And as I mentioned, we've iterated. We started the conflict with the outer tactical vest. Based on feedback from the user in theater, we went to the modular tactical vest, which addressed a number of the deficiencies. And now we have designed in the U.S. government the improved modular tactical vest, and we have given that specification to industry to build to print. So we own the technical data package for that, and industry is making it to our specifications. Aligned with that is the plate carrier, the smaller vest that doesn't have the extra soft armor. That reduces the weight being carried by the Marine in theater. We also own that design. It is interoperable, so the accoutrements that go with the improved modular tactical vest can be moved back and forth between the plate carrier and the IMTV. I mentioned to an earlier question how we communicate generally with industry, and that our 6.1, 6.2 research and development lines are handled by the Office of Naval Research and by the Naval Research Laboratory.
Thank you for your testimony.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The preponderance of our casualties are in Afghanistan now, and I believe that the preponderance of those are due to IED, roadside bombs. Recently in Afghanistan, it's my understanding that the government there outlawed ammonium nitrate, and that ammonium nitrate is the primary ingredient in Afghanistan for the making of IEDs, unlike I think in Iraq, where it was old munitions, mortar artillery rounds are the primary source for the IEDs there. what impact, and I understand that north of 90% of the ammonium nitrate in Afghanistan was used for the making actually of IEDs. What impact does this outlawing or this ban on ammonium nitrate in Afghanistan, if I'm correct in that, have in a reduction of IED capability?
Sir, thanks. That's a great question. As a point of clarification, ammonium nitrate actually has some beneficial uses in Afghanistan and every other country for road preparation and mining to some degree. But President Karzai did, at some insistence on our part, ban ammonium nitrate. I believe, and I think the command currently assesses, that will have an impact, a favorable impact on the availability of this fertilizer to be used as an explosive device. We also have a challenge with potassium chlorate, which is used to make matches. That comes out of facilities in Pakistan as well for perfectly legitimate reasons, but can be converted to explosive capability. So the short answer to your question is the enemy has shown us in Iraq and is showing us in Afghanistan that they are adaptive. Were we to be able to take away all the ammonium nitrate, they would shift somewhere else. And so while it is a good step and it will have good benefits for protecting our soldiers, Airmen and Marines, it's not going to close out their options, sir.
Have we seen any effect that can be traced back to this decision at this time in terms of any kind of slowdown or reduction in IED making capability?
Sir, it's a little early. I don't want to misspeak, but I think this ban's been in place for a little bit over a month, maybe.
Okay.
And so I think it's a little premature. However, there are indications from our intelligence sources that it will have an impact. How much so, we'll have to gauge.
Okay, very well. Thank you. In terms of individual force protection equipment, where are we at in terms of the next generation of helmet?
The enhanced combat helmet that you mentioned, sir, started as a joint effort between the United States Army and the United States Marine Corps. They did the first round of research and development testing. There was certainly potential in a new composite material that we looked at. We took on then the next step of actually putting out the request for proposals to industry and awarding a number of development contracts for test items. When we got those test items in and tested them, they did not perform as we had hoped and anticipated. We provided the results of those tests back to our industry partners so that they could make the modifications to their designs, and we would expect to begin to start receiving the next set of test items early this summer, sir.
Very well. Let's see. Could someone go over with me? I know that in the ISR area that we've been flooded with data, and I think that the primary problem seems to be it's too much information coming in and an inability to sort it in real time in order to have an effect on the battlefield. Can you tell me what improvements there are in terms of managing the information coming in from various ISR platforms?
I can speak to two initiatives that were discussed with us during the course of our work for the Airland Subcommittee. One is the National Security Agency is finding innovative ways to find more linguists to help in translating and dealing with the signals intelligence data that is being collected. And again, these are initiatives that we're unable to measure how much impact they have. In addition, the Air Force has announced plans to add 2,500 analysts to their corps to be able to process more and exploit and disseminate more of the data coming off the ISR systems. So these are two that we mentioned in our report and that were raised to us. So people are trying to deal with it. It's, breaking the back of the back end of the cycle with all of this flooding of data. But again, it's too early to tell how effective these efforts are going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Kissel.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for being here today. And I would like to note that while the apparent position of me being near the end of the line and asking questions, I do want to note that I have a whole row allocated to me here. So, don't let that kind of show you where I am in importance.
The room is a little big.
Yeah.
We're very happy back in Rayburn when we get back there. So
yeah, you kind of lose track of who's behind you when you're down here.
I didn't even see you down there for a couple of minutes. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question, and it's kind of hard to General Fuller, I think maybe this question can go to you. That this is a question I normally might run through channels, and I'm not advocating a particular vendor here. But we had, and being that so much of our conversation has been about body armor and about can we move ahead to a new technology, a new generation. I had a gentleman come to my office a while back that was on the cutting edge of science at one end of an idea and using some of the oldest technology known to mankind at the other. If what he said was true, it would seemingly be a huge step forward in the possibility of reducing weight and increasing the strength of protection to our people. And he has been working with, Department of Defense and just seemingly getting more and more frustrated as he went. I'm going to ask my military LA, Captain Tim Metters over here, to get with whoever you would like for him to get with. I would like to have a report back from y'all. Is this a possibility? Is what he's talking about realistic? Is it a step forward, a giant step forward as he's talking about? I'm not pushing this vendor. I'm just wanting some feedback as to, because if it is, then let's pursue it. If it's not, then I can just say, I'm sorry, this is not what we're looking for. But there are some things here that got me somewhat curious about what he's offering. And General Oates, in the scheme of, and Mr. Bartlett said it today, that that the proportion amount of money we spend in fighting IEDs and protecting our soldiers versus the cost of IEDs. And there's obviously we got to keep doing that. We got to protect our soldiers. But are we catching up, or are they getting farther ahead?
Sir, it's a great question. I actually think Iraq might be informative here. If we go back and look at what has transpired in Iraq and the funding that's come forward to protect our soldiers, but also allow us to understand the networks that were engaging us, begin to attack them directly, understand the devices and defeat a great number of them, the trend lines are fairly clear, and we can get back to you on the record on the specifics over the years. But in aggregate, it took the enemy more IEDs to attack us to achieve the same results. And those are all positive trend lines to now where Iraq doesn't begin to resemble this year as it did the first time I was there in 2003 and several more times after that. I do believe that if we look at the investment provided to the services and to JIDO that would directly translate to protecting our soldiers and helping us attack the networks over there, the results are clear. The difficulty is tying individual dollars to, what will 10 more dollars get you in terms of effects against the IED? That one is very tough, and we're gonna try and do better to the chairman's question and try and play back what we believe the reasonable measures of effectiveness are. But I think Iraq is informative of great success we've had in this area.
And I don't want to indicate at all that this is a monetary issue. We've got to protect our soldiers. I'm just wondering, is all the technological things we're doing, all the efforts we're making, are they getting farther ahead, or are we catching up in terms of protecting our soldiers? And I do want to also follow up with what Congressman Hunter said about, sharing the technologies and making sure that we have something sitting somewhere because somebody's chosen not to use it at that point in time, that we're not just ignoring the fact somebody else might have need for it, because there's been a couple situations brought to our attention that we followed up on that happened, and we want to make sure all our assets are being used. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks, the gentleman. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, panel members, so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking times out of your busy schedule, and thank you for your service to our nation. General Spohr, I wanted to ask, at last year's Joint Forces Protection hearing, I asked General Lennox about what the Army was doing to upgrade our small arms capabilities, specifically the M9 pistol and the M4 carbine. In regards to the M9, at that point, I cited the findings of a 2006 Center for Naval Analysis study of our soldiers and Marines in Afghanistan and also Iraq, who had engaged the enemy with their weapons in combat. And in that study, 48% of the respondents were dissatisfied with the M9 pistol, with 26% requesting a larger caliber weapon and 20% saying the M9 should be replaced. I note that the FY 2011 DoD budget includes new start authority for a handgun to replace the M9, and that the requirement may already be JROC approved. I was wondering if you could tell us what progress the Army has made towards replacing the M9 with a more powerful, modern, and feature-rich sidearm, and when can the committee expect an RFP for the new handgun, and what's the Army's timeline for fielding the new weapon?
Thank you, sir. As you say, there has been a new Joint Requirements Oversight Council requirement for a pistol approved. It was actually submitted by the Air Force, who felt the need for a new pistol, so that requirement was approved. We are still examining the requirements in the Army for a new pistol. We're aware of the study you mentioned and the soldiers' feedback on the pistol. In light of their feedback, we've done a couple of key improvements for the pistol. We've given them improved magazine, and General Fuller's people are going to put new hand grips, modular hand grips, to kind of accommodate the variety of people's hand sizes for the pistol, because we think that's a fair amount of the dissatisfaction with that weapon. We are going to look at the Air Force's requirements document. They've done a lot of work to get to this point. If we think and if we believe that requirement meets the Army's requirement, I think we could proceed with a program, but no decision has been made yet, sir.
I know there's been some talk about the caliber of the handgun and its stopping power, people being a little concerned about the small caliber that they currently have. So I'm assuming that's going to be one of the array of issues that you'll address in looking at a replacement for the M9.
Yes, sir. And as you're aware, stopping power is caliber, but there's also a component of ammunition. And you've probably heard in recent press reports about something called green ammunition, which we're going to be fielding soon for the M4 carbine. Much more stopping power, much more, we believe, lethality. We think that same technology has applicability over to the M9 pistol. So as we get done probably with fielding green ammo for the carbine, we're going to be looking at importing some of that same technology over to the pistol, where it may make up for any lethality gaps that they currently have.
Do you believe some of the concerns with the M4 as far as its range of capability will be taken up with this green ammunition? In other words, are the main objections to the weapon basically its stopping power, or are there other aspects of the M4 that are creating challenges for our men and women in service?
Sir, most of the concerns we hear about the M4 have to do with its reliability and how many rounds between stoppages, mean rounds between stoppages. The carbine as it is now is demonstrating performance well beyond its specifications. It was only required to do 600 rounds between stoppages, and it's demonstrating around 3,600. We're looking at improving the carbine, giving it a heavier barrel, some other improvements. There's been over 60 improvements made to the M4 carbine. So we think we don't get a lot of complaints, frankly, about the M4 carbine. It has met with fairly widespread success. I would defer to General Fuller if you have anything you want to add.
Thank you, sir. In light of your question, what we think about when we talk about our M4 and of our other weapons is it is a combination. It's the weapon, it's the ammunition, it's the optics, it's the training, and then equally important, it's how it interfaces with the soldier. And as General Brogan and I work through not hanging things onto soldiers, we need to ensure that what we do for body armor, for example, doesn't adversely impact a soldier's ability to get a good sight picture on their weapon. In light of what General Spohr was talking about, we are looking at improvements to our M4. We believe we've made actually a very recent one that's going to have significant impact in the field. When we were doing all the additional testing, we saw that the magazine did not reliably feed the ammunition straight up into the upper receiver. and we've now fielded a new magazine. We've pushed that into the theater. It's now part of our rapid fielding initiative, and we're rapidly getting that capability out there. But we also are getting ready to release a RFP, a request for proposal, that will give us the ability to give the soldiers that heavier barrel so they can have an increased sustained rate of fire. The Army is asking us to look at giving them back the fully automatic mode in that M4. We're also looking at changing some of the bolt and upper receiver components, and we're looking at all these different options. At the same time we're working on the M4, we're looking at a new carbine. Is there something better out there than what we currently have? But we believe the M4 is a very good, provides a very good capability to our soldiers, but it is that combination. And I think the green ammunition is going to give back a lot of that lethality that the soldiers were asking about. Where did it go? Well, it went because we gave you a much shorter barrel, a round that was designed on a longer barrel, and a lot of other technical components, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank all of our panel, particularly Lieutenant General Oates. I think you, with your combat experience in Iraq, you all bring a lot to this conversation, but in particular your experience. General Oates, our nation's ability to deliver vehicles that have mine resistance, it has been a challenge. The Humvee was a great vehicle until the enemy discovered it had a vulnerability to explosions from beneath it, which resulted in the fielding of the mine-resistant vehicle. The Stryker is a great vehicle, but unfortunately now that the bar has been raised with the introduction of the mine-resistant vehicle, the Stryker appears to be more vulnerable to that problem. What steps are you taking to address that? What does this committee need to do to help you? And above all, what are the lessons that we learned in the development of the MRAP? Because although, again, I always will commend General Brogan on a great job that he did, but it's just a sad fact that from the time we made up our minds that we were going to buy 18,000 MRAPs till they were fielded, people needlessly died in Iraq and Afghanistan. So what steps are we taking for a more survivable Stryker? What did we learn from the MRAP program so that we can field it quicker than we did, and even though General Brogan did a phenomenal job of fielding the MRAP?
Sir, thank you very much. As you know, this is a extremely complex set of independent variables on the vehicle. Afghanistan, what we've learned is due to the absence of improved roads, that there is another significant ingredient to survivability of vehicles, and that is the enemy's placement of the IED and in some cases, the inability to go off-road. The Stryker is a very, very survivable vehicle, in my opinion. I've been in it and been in combat with it. In Afghanistan, it has unique capability because it can go off-road and it's very quiet, and so it can seek to avoid obvious emplacements of IEDs. So just taking that independent variable, you could conclude the Stryker is more survivable given that the MRAP is largely confined to the road, whereas the enemy has a very clear attack axis. We have studied the process of the MRAP and JIDO and looked at the evolution and understanding of the V-shape and U-shape holes, and we are working with the MRAP task force underneath the senior integration group to see what new technologies there may be out there that we've not yet explored and how we might offer some assistance to the MRAP task force and what we discover in our own technological reviews. But to date, my major concern is trying to help the forces that are in Afghanistan detect these underbody explosions where they're located and seek to defeat them before we drive over them. That is my primary focus right now. The MRAP task force is currently looking at the new set of vehicles, and we're in a support role there, sir, and we offer advice along those roads, but we don't produce the vehicle platform itself. So I may have to defer on this issue to my good friend down there who does the MRAP business or understands it better than I do.
Would anyone like to address what steps are being taken on the Stryker? It's my understanding that one of the manufacturers has come up with a double V type bottom. The immediate question that I would have is, I believe it was General Blum that explained to me that the drivetrain on the Humvee had the unintended consequence of shaping the charge, where the force of the blast tended to go in the cab because of that. I guess my first question would be, with that double V, do you get that same problem with the unintended consequence of shaping the charge at the, I guess that would be the apex of where the two V's come together?
Yes, sir. As you mentioned, industry has come to the Army with a proposal for the Stryker for what we call the double V hull. It's really a W, and we were concerned about the same thing you were, is that the apex, wouldn't that channel all the energy and perhaps even make things worse? Industry believes not. They've done some actual blast tests. They've done modeling as well. They say because that apex is significantly higher than the floor of the Stryker used to be, that the exponential difference in height from the IED makes a huge difference in survivability. Nevertheless, we are going to ask, and we've asked OSD for permission to build prototypes of this vehicle. And as quickly as we get those prototypes, we intend to take them up to Aberdeen and blow them up and see for real how
General,
that
I guess
works.
my next question would be, going back to our responsibilities, do you have the financial resources? Do you have all the financial resources that you need to expedite this program?
Sir, right now in fiscal year 10, we believe right now we can initiate this effort with no support needed from Congress. If that changes, if we develop some need, we will immediately come back to this committee.
Okay. General Oates, going back to your observation, and since you actually mentioned potassium chloride and ammonium nitrate as being part of the problem, I'm curious how, well, no, I will make an observation. The Center for Remote Sensing from Satellites happens to be in South Mississippi. One of the things they pointed out to me was that from space, looking at extremely slight differences in temperatures of trees, they can tell me or you which trees in the forest have pine beetles, which trees in the forest are stressed for lack of water. They can tell you the 10 most likely places to catch bluefin tuna, updated every 90 minutes. A number of things that are just absolutely remarkable they can tell us from information coming from space. I would imagine that both ammonium nitrate and potassium chloride have to give off vapors. I would imagine they have to give off heat. To what extent have you just put out the word to industry, I need someone to help me find a better way to locate these substances when they're in concentrations of 10 pounds or more?
Mr. Chairman, it's a great question, and I would like to take that one offline with you, only because we actually have some pretty good technology right now that we believe is going to assist us in detecting these items. But we are actively looking for additional assistance in both change detection on the road and the detection of the actual items. And I'd be happy to share with you, for the record, on an emerging technology that we intend to put in theater here very soon. It actually returns to the point that Congressman Hunter made, is if we can achieve some persistent surveillance on these roads, it will increase our confidence in understanding where the enemy is operating, what he's doing with those roads. To that end, this is one of the top priorities for Central Command, is the emplacement of additional tethered capability to surveil these roads, much as we used in Iraq. And that's the first tranche of items that we have funded and will be moving forward to Afghanistan. The technology you're describing, we'd be very interested in, sir, and we have openly and directly with vendors indicated that we'd like to close that gap.
I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you has this committee and our appropriated counterparts, have they provided for you all the resources, financial resources you need to pursue this?
Yes, sir. At present, we don't have any issues, and like my friend here, sir, and based on what you've told me personally, we would return to you immediately, because we understand the sense of urgency. If we need additional resources, I would not hesitate to come ask for them.
Lastly, and I'll open this up to the panel, on almost every visit to theater, when you ask the troops, what is it that you want, what can we get you, almost in every instance, it comes back, they kind of shuffle their feet and say, gee, if you could just make my body armor lighter. What sort of resources do you have to pursue that? And again, was that adequately addressed in the President's budget request? Do you have the resources you need if a manufacturer were to come to you today with a 10% or 20% reduction in that weight? Would you have the funds available to see if that product is worth is worth purchasing?
Sir, in light of that question, yes, we are, as General Brogan said, we really are at the knee of the curve. We're looking for a new technology to be able to get us that lighter weight in particular to our hard plates. If it was found, we would buy it. I don't know how much we would buy, but we would be buying it. But we don't have it out there right now.
Okay, again, General Fuller, if it was found, do you have the resources available now? Would you need an additional line item in the authorization and appropriations bills? I guess that's what I would like to know. Do you have the authority to pursue that if you saw a product that you liked and thought was worthwhile for the troops? And if General Brogan, if you'd like to address that.
We absolutely have the resources we would need to go test it to see if it was in fact better. We entertain frequently industry members who think they have an idea of what could be a better body armor. Unfortunately, many of those are PowerPoint, and that's about how deep they are. Okay. Very few people bring us actual product that we can go shoot and test. But if someone has that, we have the ability immediately to go to Aberdeen Test Center and shoot those and determine if it's good enough. And then using our below-threshold reprogramming authority, and because O&M is a fungible appropriation, we can very easily move that and begin to buy it. And then if we needed significant quantities, we would put that in the YOCO request, either at the beginning of the fiscal year or like we've often received the June additional money, sir.
General, can I follow up on that? Because this is, I happen to come from, as most of the members of this committee, very pro-defense community. Heck of a lot of National Guardsmen, heck of a lot of people who are serving and have served, and therefore a heck of a lot of moms and dads who follow this issue very closely. So if someone were to come to you with a better body armor,
sir,
are you telling me that you have the financial resources to not only test it, but to begin acquisition immediately?
We certainly have to test, and we would have the money to begin production, probably not to outfit the entire force, okay, and we would come to you for that, but we do have the ability to begin production. I have right now on my desk a letter from the father of a Marine who is convinced that NASA has an armor that we should be using just because he knows that in space they armor their satellites. I can tell you I have personally visited the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California and looked at what they have, and it's not designed to stop bullets. It's designed to stop small pieces of junk that are flying at high velocity in space. We truly do reach out and try to find these solutions, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I don't have anything much further, just to follow up a little bit on the Stryker discussion. We have several Stryker brigades out of Fort Lewis in my district, and it has received rave reviews from the soldiers coming back who have used it, not just in Iraq but in Afghanistan. And I think that is an important point to make, that you made, General, that its maneuverability really improves its survivability. And also, the soldiers love it because it gives them a little bit of control of their own destiny. They're not counting on a piece of metal below them to save them. They're counting on their own ability to foresee danger and react to it. And they very much appreciate that. I guess the one question I have as we go through on the double V from the state of Washington, I would say W Hall, but whatever. As we test it and go forward, number one, we do want to make sure we want to move as quickly as possible, but we want to make sure it works. And I know you know that, but it's going to be particularly difficult in this instance because if it does work, we're going to want to do it quickly. So we have to be really careful about that. I've gotten a different answer from a couple different people to this question. If it works and we decide we want to do this, however, it is a situation that it is not possible to retrofit the existing, I think, roughly 2,400 Strykers, that the way this is designed, it will have to be built on new Strykers. Is that your understanding? We couldn't, if we decide this works, we couldn't go back and put it on the existing fleet.
Sir, you're correct. It cannot be retrofitted currently. Now, we've asked the question, could we hypothetically saw a Stryker and put the top back on it? That has not been the case so far. And so, fortunately, there is currently an active production line from Stryker. So if this improvement were to play out, we would ask the manufacturer to cut this improvement in, right, and so it would become a part of new strikers coming off the line.
And they're very confident that they can do that as they go forward. I understand that. And then also, just following up the original point, if we do this, it's important to emphasize that the existing Stryker fleet is still very, very useful. And we certainly don't want to create the impression, because we have a new variant, that the old variant isn't still very, very effective for the warfighter. We've got 2,400 of them. We want to use them, and from all reports, they're performing quite well. Thank you. I don't have anything further. I yield back.
Chair, thanks, the gentleman. The chair recognizes Mr. Hunter for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my little brother's a specialist. He's a Stryker guy who's over there in Iraq now. So he's Chairman Smith's constituent. He and his family every now and then in Fort Lewis. In fact, he's home right now to have his third boy, or his third baby, first boy, on his little 3-week leave, and then he goes back for 6 months over to Iraq. So I want to make sure that those Strykers are good to go. One thing that I want to bring up that I think is important, and I think it's important that JIATO remains a consistent entity, probably forever, because one thing we haven't talked about, in future wars, the enemy knows how to get to us now. It's IEDs. So if you look at the level of IED in Afghanistan, think of what Iran could do with their level of sophistication. Think of what China could do, or a country that's not a backwoods spot like Afghanistan. The enemy knows how to do it now. It's going to be a threat to us forever, because we haven't been able to actually defeat IEDs. So I think this is something we're going to have to keep in mind forever when it comes to warfare. Why go line to line with us when you can just IED the hell out of us forever, whenever we're in someone else's territory? So I think this is something that even when Afghanistan dies down, I think it's going to be up to us here and to you all to ask for it, for us to maintain this persistence when it comes to IEDs, because we're going to see it forever, and we're going to see it in 20 years or 30 years. We're going to say, hey, look at Afghanistan and Iraq. We know how to do this. My last question for General Oates. You wrote here in your testimony, in the last several months, Task Force Odin has been supplemented with U.S. Air Force Liberty aircraft to good effect. We are not where we need to be yet on this capability, but are rapidly moving to close this gap. Do you have metrics? I mean, how do you know Odin's working? Have IEDs gone down where it's been flying? Have we been killing guys, or what?
Yes, sir. Colonel Don Galley, who commands 3rd Cab, and I go back about 20 years. And I was in Iraq when Odin was started. I'm a big fan of it. We didn't have Liberty in Iraq. Now there's Liberty in Afghanistan, and they are roughly halfway through their intended fielding. I'm sorry, about a third of the way through their intended fielding of Liberty. I have actual metrics I can share with you, I'll take for the record, on the effects we've had with Odin. The problem to date is Odin has been carrying the load for the whole country, now with about 7 Liberty aircraft and about 14 more to come, maybe 15 more. And I think that we'll be able to expand that coverage. There is a direct, compelling corollary between integrating air assets like Odin or Liberty with a maneuver force towards success on defeating the IED threat.
Let me interrupt you there. Is Liberty integrating like Odin does, or is it being used as the Air Force uses Predators, using pred lines based on priorities, or is it being used, that sensor-shooter Odin relationship that made Odin so effective, is it being used that way?
No, sir. Odin resides inside the Combat Aviation Brigade, and it is a very tight link with the maneuver force. Liberty, though, is following the priorities of the ground commander. And so, although it doesn't work directly inside a U.S. Army Combat Aviation Brigade, it does respond to the ground commander's priorities. The way the Air Force and the Army and the Marine Corps utilize their aviation assets, is somewhat different. We really look at effects. I personally believe that the additional assets of Liberty will generate those effects we're looking for, but the command and control structure is different. There's no doubt about that, sir.
Would you recommend that the Army have tactical control of Liberty as it's intermixed with Odin?
Sir, I don't dodge many questions, and I'm not dodging this one, but I do believe that's the inherent authority of the commander in Afghanistan to determine how he wants to command and control those assets. I'll defer to his judgment.
Okay, how about this? As a division commander in Iraq, would you have rather had control of the air assets that are watching your roads in your AO, or would you rather have a different service provide that for you?
Sir, as a division commander in Iraq, I had control of the air assets that operated in my area, but I also received assets based on priority. So as a ground maneuver guy, I've always been more comfortable by culture having an air-ground team under my direct control. But when I was the priority effort in Iraq, I received additional assets, and I think sometimes that's not quite understood. I receive actually more assets if I'm the priority, and there again, that goes to the ground commander. So I have full faith and confidence the guys over there know what they're doing, and if they need to make a change, and incidentally, they'd made a change to the command and control relationships of the engineer route clearance teams based on an observation that they should be in direct support, not in general support, and we can show you a direct corollary to improve in that regard. But the commanders in the country made that call.
Great. I would love to see those metrics too for Odin. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Angus.
Thank you, General Brogan and General Fuller. As you can see, the issue of body armor is a consistent theme here, and I have one more question before we head out to vote. Both of you have testified to the fact that you feel, as far as procurement goes, you have the right amount of body armor to support the force. You also said, when asked about lighter weight body armor, that the technology just isn't there to reduce the weight of the small arms protective inserts. And so we find ourselves in dilemma. Industry is now saying that because the services have almost stopped buying body armor, they no longer have the internally generated funds to continue development of lighter weight products. And the number of firms who supply body armor and its ceramic tile components is being reduced due to the lack of procurement. So how do we balance this? You are not really buying body armor, which leads to the industrial base shrinking. There is no investment from DoD in research and development, and now the industrial base isn't putting its own money into research and development because it doesn't have any. You are saying the technology just isn't there to reduce the weight of body armor, but it doesn't seem like anyone is actively investing in technology. So where do we go from here, given those realities?
Yes, ma'am. You do show the challenge that we have inside the Department of Defense right now. Because we had such large procurements, we did have the industry invest their own IR&D, recognizing that they had an opportunity to have a large procurement to balance that investment that they've made. What we're trying to do right now is bundle all of our sustainment contracts together under Defense Logistics Agency between the Marines, the Army, Air Force, and other services to ensure, while we're working through this action of do we have a research and development line dedicated to soldier protection items, that we at least maintain that industrial base. So if we want to go and contract with them for research and development, future activities, they'll still be in the business of wanting to do this. At the same time, we are still working those S&T endeavors. When we had the question about the enhanced combat helmet, for example, that technology actually started in the MRAP and other heavy armor combat vehicles. It was part of the add-on armor that we were using, that new technology. We're now taking it and trying to conform it into a new helmet design, and that's where we're having some challenges. It works great in flat sheets. It doesn't work as well when we conform it. So those S&T efforts, I think, will continue to move forward. We still are investing in that arena, and we might see some future efforts coming out of that. But I recognize we do need to look at a dedicated research and development line. We're going to work with the other services and the Department of Defense to articulate what exactly is in that line and how much is in that line. And while we're doing it, we're going to try to maintain that industrial base through bundling all our contracts to keep them viable.
General Brogan.
Yes, Congresswoman, the only thing I would add is that at least one of the vendors that you mentioned is one of the 5 largest defense contractors in the United States. Kind of difficult for me to believe that they don't have any IR&D. They may not place it here because they don't see the largest return on investment as compared to some of their other efforts. As General Fuller said, we do have to have S&T dollars to look for the breakthrough. It's not I think, valuable for us to continue to buy ceramic plates in large excess of what we need just to keep the industrial base doing plates, because if we find that breakthrough in technology, we're going to want to buy that next best thing, and we will have created an obsolete item that we spent the taxpayers' money on. So it is a challenge how to adequately balance it. I think we need significant communication between us and industry as opposed to lobbyists and you all. Them talking with us would be valuable, and we have provided them in our public communication forum the desires of what it is we need so that we can help them target those IR&D funds. The other not often used research and development tool is something called a CRADA, a cooperative research and development activity, where the U.S. government and industry cooperatively develop a piece of equipment, and I think we probably need to explore that in this area.
Thank you both for your testimony.
Gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman. And I would remind the gentleman that there's about 6 minutes left on this vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question, and that is sometimes there's an IED blast where it's not a catastrophic kill for the vehicle, but because of the overpressure, it causes casualties, if I understand it right. Now, have we been able to make any gains in terms of force protection relative to the overpressure from a blast?
That most likely happens in an up-armored Humvee where the survivability capsule is in fact perforated. And unfortunately, as we know, the UAH is often a catastrophic kill. What we find most often in MRAPs is that we keep the blast overpressure outside of survivability capsule. Our injuries are the result of acceleration, not blast overpressure. So first the vehicle is accelerated up into the air by the force of the blast. That happens very rapidly and causes compression injuries of the spinal column and of the lower back. And then second, that vehicle impacts the ground, which is a slower event, relatively speaking, similar to an automotive crash. And we have energy-absorbing seats to try to deal with that. The unfortunate thing, and I think what you're getting at, Mr. Kaufman, is traumatic brain injuries. Those are not normally caused by blast overpressure. It's that acceleration event that causes the head to rapidly twist. And so either shearing occurs inside the brain, or the brain moves slower than the skull stops, the brain then impacts the skull, causing bruising, swelling, or if it happens to the central cortex, loss of consciousness. No helmet is able to protect against that, and because our occupants of the vehicles need to be able to scan, use the windows, we can't tether their head like they would in a NASCAR. So what we're looking for are ways to improve the seating and restraint system to help decouple the acceleration experienced by the vehicle from that which is delivered to the occupants.
Sir, also in light of that, the Army is fielding a helmet sensor. We had a Generation 1 that we fielded, and what we're trying to do is measure what's happening to that individual when they do have any type of traumatic event. So we can capture that data, provide it back to the medical community. So as General Brogan was talking specifically about the medical conditions that are happening while you're going through this traumatic event, we want to be able to provide that data back to the Army medical community so they can assist in understanding what's actually happening. And we're measuring it through a new helmet sensor that we'll have that will measure what's happening in full access to the soldier's head via their helmet when the event is going on. And then we're getting ready to field that capability. We had an initial capability out there, and now we're getting ready to field an upgraded one, longer battery life. You don't have to go up there and touch every helmet to get the data off it. We can do it remotely. And it also can measure more axis of movement, really what your head is really doing inside that helmet. 6 degrees of freedom, sir.
I would appreciate if you have a written description of what you just mentioned. I'd appreciate if you could get that to myself and maybe other members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Bartlett, there are about 4 minutes left, but I'm going to verbally honor Ms. Sandra Day O'Connor. I don't think I have to.
I have a very quick comment. I think it's unlikely that we're going to be purchasing body armor from some big industry that has the capacity, the capital to invest in R&D, which is why we need the dedicated R&D line, because I think the creativity and innovation is going to be in small business, and they just don't have the capital to do that. We need to help.
Gentlemen, thank each and every one of you for what you do, for your service in theater, for your service back here stateside. I think it has been one of the better hearings that we've had. I thank you very, very much for being straightforward with us. General Brogan, thanks as always for the phenomenal job of your life-saving job on the MRAP program. And with that, if there are no further questions, the subcommittee hearing is adjourned.